So just talking about New South Wales legislation, first of all, there's been a few changes to the New South Wales legislation, and that's the fact that they removed the no grounds evictions. So owners now need to provide a reason to end the tenancy, and that's whether that's a periodic or fixed term tenancy. So this is really sort of coming in line with what Victoria has done as well. So when a client is selling or they're moving in or they're renovating the property, they need to ensure that there's sufficient reasons and proof that eviction is actually genuine. The other thing as well that they've brought in is that rent bidding is now illegal. So it's illegal for agents or landlords to solicit higher offers than the advertised rent. And they brought in 7 minimum standards for habitation, and these include things like structural soundness, lighting, ventilation, plumbing. And the other thing as well is disclosure obligations. So material facts about the property. We've got to make sure that with a New South Wales rental property, that any history of flooding or significant repairs is actually disclosed to the tenant. The final thing is rent increases, that they've now been adjusted in line with all the other states. So rent increases can only happen once a year. So moving on to the Queensland legislative changes, Jess, do you want to actually cover some of those changes, what's recently occurred, and also what's potentially in the offing as well, as we do have our ear close to the ground?
Rent bidding is one of the changes that just recently came in for us. So if a tenant was to apply for a property and they really loved that property and they saw quite a few people at the open for inspection, they could offer above the asking price and we could accept it. So we could never actually say to the applicant, oh, hey, if you offer $10 extra, then you'll get it. That was never allowed. But now if a tenant even offers it without any prompting, we can't accept it. So it puts a higher importance on when we are commencing marketing a property or going to market. We need to make sure we're getting that rent price correct, or even slightly above.
So can I ask you, so how do you actually ensure that, we don't get sort of situations where there is rent bidding, because we'll see, it can still occur?
Yeah, definitely. So to avoid it, we do thorough research. So we do comparative market analyses, looking at data of surrounding properties in the area that have leased. So we get a really accurate depiction of the market. We're also experts in our areas. We have a high volume of properties in a concentrated area, which allows us to be experts in that market. We know that market because we're leasing in that market consistently. And that expertise is what we can bring to the table when we're passing that on to our owners. So we want to make sure we're getting the highest possible rent return, but also securing good quality tenants and reducing vacancy periods. And there's always a bit of a balance between all three of those. 12 months ago, our legislation changed where we could increase the rent every 12 months. It used to be every 6 months prior to that. Changed last year to be every 12. And then just recently, in a shock decision, they decided to link the increase to the property and not to the tenancy, which can be a little bit confusing. And a lot of the time when you hear that, you think, yeah, but how has that actually changed? The effect that has is if you wanted to move your lease agreement so that that tenant wasn't vacating on Christmas Eve, so they were vacating a couple of months earlier, then you might have offered them a 10-month lease. And in that situation, when that 10-month lease expires, you wouldn't be able to increase the rent for another 2 months. It also affects break leases, which is when you have a tenant in a 12-month fixed term lease, for example, and they may get a new job interstate and need to move out of that property 6 months in. Under normal circumstances, we would have been able to increase that rent because it was linked to the tenancy and not the property. With market fluctuations and market increases in the suburbs we manage, we're seeing $50 increases within that kind of time frame. So that's where the owners are missing out on that rent increase, because under a break lease, we can't increase the rent unless it's been 12 months. I think there's lots of legislation around advertising the property and adhering to the promises you've made in advertising. So if we didn't advertise with an increase, it means we wouldn't be able to increase the rent. So we have to be careful to make sure we're very transparent at the time of advertising the property.
Transparent and thorough to make sure that we don't miss any opportunity to increase our clients' revenue.
Correct.
That's really
and
good.
accurate. Predicting market 4 months out is always a little bit of a challenge, but it's something that we need to do to make sure we're on the top end of that market and potentially making up for that, not being able to increase the rent where we can.
Okay, so what other changes have been made, or is that it for Queensland?
So they're the two big ones that have come into effect. We did have some minimum housing standards that have been around for a little while. They came into effect in 2023 for new tenants and have coming into effect for all tenancies from next month. So just around the corner. Now we're quite lucky with OpenCorp because we have a lot of new built properties, which are all built with the minimum housing standards already in place. So we don't have to stress too much. But a couple of the things in there that really stick out for me are that the property has to be free of vermin and mold before the tenant moves in, which is a pretty easy one, a pretty common one, an easy one to maintain. And there has to be privacy to all bedrooms. And that one can be a little bit of a tricky one because privacy can be determined by the tenant. So that just means having blinds or block-out blinds on each windows. It is understood to be if someone is standing outside the window or a neighbour shouldn't be able to look into the window and see you inside your property. Is how we get away with that one, or how we... Correct. That's how we handle that one. Correct.
All right, okay. And is there anything else that's coming in the future, do you think?
Yeah, there is some. When they were talking about the recent legislation changes, they also mentioned a few to come into play. There's one really exciting one, which I think is really great for the industry here in Queensland, and I believe they already do this in WA, which is quite exciting, is CPD points. So what that means is all property managers will have to do training each year, and that's going to be monitored by the Office of Fair Trading. So look, this is probably going to take a year or two to come into effect in Queensland, but we have a lot of owners or individuals who run their own business, and they might run a small portfolio and don't have a very big support network behind them. It's a very common style of property management here in Queensland, and the CPD points are there to make sure that the property managers are keeping up with their education and these legislation changes.